Are universities going to be safe places to live and study come the new academic term, September 2021? Well, let me just gaze into my crystal ball. I don't have a crystal ball. Basically, it depends on vaccines. Hello everyone, welcome back to The Attic. My name's Mark Jago. I'm a philosophy professor in the UK. Today I want to talk about a question that I know a lot of people are talking about, a lot of people are worried about. Are universities going to be safe places in the new term in September 2021? That's a question that's being asked both by existing students, returning students, and new students going to the universities for the first time. Also, it's on the minds of lecturers. We all want to go back to being on campus, in-person teaching, but we want it to be safe. So if you're finding this content useful, do me a favour, hit that big old thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and if you haven't already, hit that bell icon to get notifications. So let's just remind ourselves of all of the things that universities did last September 2020, and what happened. So in the lead up to September 2020, I think pretty much all UK universities went to huge efforts to make the campus a lot safer than it otherwise would be. So putting in things like reduced capacities in teaching rooms. So, a lecture theatre that could normally take 100 people would be reduced in capacity to, say, 50 or whatever. Putting in one-way systems so you didn't have kind of loads of students coming this way and running into each other. And making mask wearing inside in teaching rooms, in shared spaces, mandatory. Now, an awful lot of work went into preparing for all of this. But as it turned out, it wasn't that effective. Pretty much right at the start of term, COVID numbers peaked. Loads and loads of students had to go into self-isolation, and it was a little bit of a mess, to be honest. Lots of students who had just arrived at university had to go straight away into isolation. Isolation wasn't fun for anybody. Conditions were really bad. There was a huge number of complaints. You only have to look in the media back in September 2020 to see just how unhappy students who'd moved to university were. And it really didn't take long for, I think, pretty much every university to move to online teaching for the vast majority of their students. And I think the reason was it doesn't really matter how many restrictions and conditions you put on place for teaching spaces, because students are still going to mix. They're all living together in large halls of accommodation, residential halls. So you're going to have large numbers of students mixing regardless of how safe you make teaching spaces. Okay, so now thinking forward to this September 2021, what's happening? Well, it's a bit more of a mixed picture. So some universities have said that they're going to keep on requiring masks, face masks, to be worn in shared spaces, teaching spaces. So this, for instance, includes Oxford, Cambridge, UCL, and a bunch of other universities. But some other universities have said, well, now we don't legally have to do that. They're not going to require it either. And other universities have got rid of the one-way systems, the reduced teaching room capacity, that kind of thing. Now, just to be clear here, it's no longer a legal requirement across the UK that you have to wear a mask indoors. But that doesn't mean that individual institutions can't require it. An institution like a university, they can make up additional rules on top of what's legally required. They do this all the time, right? Think about exam regulations. They're not the law, but they are regulations that you have to follow if you attend that university. So universities are perfectly legally able to say, right, if you're going to be studying in this room, you have to do this or that, you have to wear a mask or whatever, so long as it's a reasonable request based on their own health and safety assessments. So some, but not all universities are going to be requiring face masks to be worn in teaching spaces. But, based on how that went last year, that alone probably won't be enough to make teaching spaces, universities, safe to be in. So basically, it's all coming down to vaccines. Vaccines are the big difference between September 2021 and last year, September 2020, okay? In principle, vaccines could make universities reasonably safe places to go, but it all depends on uptake. So around the world, different countries, different institutions have different takes on how to promote or how to require people to go for vaccines. Okay, so for instance, in the US right now, in New York, proof of vaccination, at least one shot, is required for pretty much any business in New York. So not just to go to university, but if you want to go for a coffee shop, or you want to go to do your shopping, you've got to be able to show that you've had at least one shot. Historically, requiring proof of vaccination for other things like tuberculosis is kind of standard in many places around the world. So in America, in American universities, that's pretty standard. If you go and study at a French university like my partner did, she had to have various certificates translated showing that she'd had various jabs. When I moved to Australia to live, I had to have a bunch of inoculations and I had to have proof of this, that, and the other to get entry to the country, to get my visa. So lots of places around the world way back pre-COVID required similar kind of things. So talking about showing medical status, vaccine status in order to do things like enter a country, enter a university, go to halls of residence, that's not a new thing at all. It is quite unusual in the UK. We don't really do that kind of thing in the UK historically. Now, there was some kind of talk recently about whether there would be vaccine passports for universities. The government has now said they're not going to require that. Okay, so it looks like UK universities aren't going to require you to have vaccines in order to study or be resident in their halls of residence for September this year. What there might be is vaccine passports to go to clubs and that kind of thing. So there's this kind of soft push. It's like you don't have to have your vaccines to come here, but if you want to do the fun stuff, then you're going to need to get your vaccines and prove it. So you might kind of want to do that. Obviously, all these kind of things are controversial. I made a video a couple of weeks back about the ethics of vaccine passports requiring you to prove your medical status, whether or not infringes on your civil liberties. I don't think there's a clear case that it does infringe on your civil liberties, but, these things are still going to be controversial. So for here, let's just kind of stick to the facts and see where we are. In order for universities to be reasonably safe places for teaching, they're going to have to be a high proportion of vaccinated students. So one thing to remember here is a vaccination doesn't make you immune to COVID. It reduces the chance of you catching COVID in the first place, and then it reduces the chance to a higher extent of you getting serious complications needing hospitalization or whatever. So the Pfizer vaccine, I think it's about 88% effective against COVID. The AstraZeneca, which I've got, is unfortunately slightly less effective. So not everyone with the vaccine will be totally immune to COVID. It just means that when you've got a large number of people who are vaccinated, the spread of COVID is going to be much reduced. So what you would need in a particular classroom is a pretty high number of vaccinated people. By vaccination there, we mean 2 doses and ideally a couple of weeks after the second dose. So where are we at the moment? So using NHS figures as of the 5th of August, in the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket, that's the bracket where most university students fall, obviously not all of them, but most of them, 63.8% of men have had their first shot. And that jumps to 71.3% of women who've had their first shot. Okay, the numbers for the second shot are much lower, but I'm focusing on first shot here, not because that's enough, you still need your second shot, but because I'm assuming that if you've already been in for your first shot, then you're planning to get your second shot pretty much as soon as you can, and that would be before the end of September when teaching starts. Okay, so for men in that age group, that's just over a third who haven't had it yet. Okay, so if that's how things stand in September, it's not a very rosy picture. If you've got a class and only 60-something% of people are fully vaccinated, that's not going to feel a very safe place. I don't think I would feel safe teaching in those rooms. So it's interesting to think about why those take-up rates are so low. They're much lower than they are for older age groups. That's not really because of the availability of vaccines. There's way more vaccines that are available than there are people taking them up. Vaccines have been available to that younger age group for quite a few weeks now. So it's something to do with resistance to going in and getting that vaccine. Now, personally, I don't think this has got anything to do with kind of hardline anti-vaxxers. I don't think that they are, by and large, COVID skeptics. I don't think that's what's causing this. So it's either the idea that you get in some circles that, we're out of lockdown now, this is all over, why do I need to go for a vaccine? It's all good, we're back to normal. That's not right at all. We're definitely not back to normal. Or it's the kind of slightly more selfish idea that I'm a young person, I'm very unlikely to die from COVID or need hospitalization, so why would I get a vaccine? Again, I think that is just completely wrong for two reasons. Firstly, it's not guaranteed that you're going to be okay. Young people have died from COVID, young people have been hospitalized, but look, even if you're not, you can still have a really, really shitty time if you catch COVID. So last September, I taught a lot of students who got sick from COVID and they had a really, really bad time. Some of them were ill for the whole semester. They had to isolate in a room a long way away from home. They couldn't see their friends. They couldn't see anyone, and they had to do that for a long time. For a lot of people, a lot of universities, conditions for isolating weren't great. In some cases, they were really, really bad. You don't want to put yourself through that. So look, I'm not here to be telling you what you must do, what you ought to do. I'm really just expressing what I hope is going to happen. The big picture for going back to university, I want it to be safe. I want it to be safe for me. I want it to be safe for lecturers. I want it to be safe for students, for the admin staff, for everyone. University is such a great experience. I want everyone to experience it and experience it kind of in the best way that it can be. And this year we're going back to face-to-face teaching. It has the potential to be really, really good. And all we need for that to be a really great experience for pretty much everyone involved is people to get their vaccines. So yeah, there are people who can't get a vaccine for medical reasons. There are a small number of anti-vaxxers out there who just ain't going to get it and you're not going to convince them, whatever. But we're talking small numbers there. For the vast majority of people who haven't yet got their vaccine, there's no real objection to do it. There's no medical reason why not. Basically, the message is, we can do this, we can make it really great, we can make it safe for everyone, safe for ourselves, safe for everyone else. Go out there, get your vaccine, wear your face mask, be responsible, maintain social distancing, keep everyone safe. Okay, that is it for today. Thank you so much for watching this far. Leave me a comment down below, give this video a big old thumbs up, hit subscribe if you haven't already, hit that bell icon to get notifications, and I will see you guys back here soon.